The adoption of electric vehicles is one of the big themes that we at Orange Capital Partners invest in, and we have a large position, which is Tesla, which is driving that, which is driven by that theme. Now, interestingly enough, we're working on a critique of big ideas. So there's an essay that is still in the works, and this is just a prelim here, where we're going through all the big ideas that have been communicated over the last couple of weeks towards the end of last year, beginning of this year. It's kind of the big idea season, and we're criticizing it in two ways. One is it's one of those fallacies of investing that you can actually, you have big ideas, and they usually start at the beginning of the year. And we're criticizing this in several ways, in particular because we believe it's misleading actually to have people think that they can that they can trust these types of trends and make money with them. It's really misleading, and we're going into much more detail. But more importantly, we're actually also, by doing this, it helps us also think more deeply about some of these trends and how we relate to them. And this is actually more important. The purpose of this podcast is to give people a sense for what it feels like to run a hedge fund. And it's really important sometimes to sit back and think thoroughly about, okay, what is it we're doing here? Why are we invested in what we're invested in? What are the trends? What is the actual essence of the money-making process that we're betting on as investors? That's kind of the, let's say, that's the real meat around the bone here. And fortunately enough, I can tell you, when you do these things, when you take just a simple idea, electric vehicles, and you think about it, and you try to think sort of in a Richard Feynman type of way, what is it actually? What is it that I see? And what is it that I think? And then while doing that, you start peeling the onion here. For example, with electric vehicles, you think that, well, there's a cost decline, there's adoption, there's some sort of maybe trend or some marketing gimmick or something which is driving people towards buying these things, and Tesla is taking advantage of that. And then once you start dissecting the onion, all of a sudden you realize, no, this is all wrong. There's no trend. There's no Moore's law or Wright's law or anything like that. Electric vehicles are not driven by any of that stuff. The one and only thing which is driving the adoption of the electric vehicles is Tesla. The entrepreneurial ingenuity, the persistence, and the sheer size of the company that are enabling this. And the reason this is so important is because there's no innate law of electric vehicle design or technology like there is with semiconductor design. I'm going to discuss this more deeply. But my point here is that the reason electric vehicles are even a theme is because of Tesla. Tesla is electric vehicles, and Tesla will drive the adoption of electric vehicles, and not the industry. The industry, in fact, will at best be a bystander, if not even a loser in this game. This is similar to Amazon, which is driving AWS. AWS didn't just happen. There's no Moore's law of AWS or anything like that. It was Amazon and the construction of the company, the ingenuity, sometimes serendipity, whatever it is, but it's the company. The mobile technology around the iPhone did not happen because mobile technology somehow was born and started to proliferate throughout the industry. Mobile technology is what it is because of Apple, and to some extent now Samsung. So we have two players here, the same way we have two players in AWS and Azure. But it's the companies. It's not, there's no Moore's law of electric vehicles. There's no Moore's law of AWS. Moore's law is helping those things, of course, but the actual success of AWS, of electric vehicles, of iPhones, and so on and so forth. There's more examples here. Even GPU technology, NVIDIA, GPU, everybody can make a GPU, but it's NVIDIA and the ingenuity of the company which is driving the adoption of these technologies. This is an Not Even Wrong podcast. It's February 10th, 2023. This is Krim Delco. For the day, the fund is down 9.3%. The market is up 20 basis points. For the year, we are up 62.3%. The market is up 6%. We're outperforming by 56.3%. So we are talking about electric vehicles, which is one of the themes or one of the big ideas that we picked up. This one in particular comes from ARK Invest. And I don't want to pick on funds or names or anything, it's irrelevant. We want to focus on the ideas here. And like I said in the prelude, there's two ways to think about this big idea business. One, we can discuss the idea of big ideas per se, and there's an essay coming out, it's still in the works, where we're going to pretty deeply discuss these things and also even go a little bit philosophical here. What is an idea and why is it important? Ideas are very important. Ideas are super, super important, and we have to be very, very careful when we use the word idea, in particular when we use it to actually do something, let's say, make money, okay? So because ideas is one of those things that people use in anecdotal English or vernacular or whatever you want to call it, and that's fine. But sort of, there's a civil use and there's a professional use, and the professional use is very, very serious because ideas are formulating structure that helps us predict what's going on in nature. It helps us solve problems, and solving problems helps us, getting from A to B, creating wealth, accumulating resources, solving problems, generating a better life for us. Well, whatever it may be that we're trying to achieve, ideas are very, very important. So when we say big ideas, we want to be really, really sure that those ideas that we're proliferating are good enough. They're useful enough. Good ideas need to be tested in the marketplace. And one of the conclusions that I'm going to now just sort of bring out, we're going to discuss this very, very deeply, but the conclusion is that ideas need validation, like everything else. Everything else in life, natural selection, entrepreneurial ideas, whatever idea, whatever angle you want to look at, what we need is validation. Without validation, ideas are just empty words. And actually the working title right now is Happy Customers Are Always Right. Because when it comes to entrepreneurship and wealth creation, ideas have to be iterated around happy customers. This is the fundamental thesis. Now, when it comes to electric vehicles, this is now, we're kind of taking one of the interesting insights that we got throughout this work, and we're making an episode out of it because it's really important. Excuse me. Because, of course, electric vehicles are at the core of our fund, the Orange Capital Partners. They're at the core of our biggest position, Tesla. And the thing is this, often things are not the way they seem, because the general narrative, even in the ARK Invest deck, is that the adoption of electric vehicles is driven by things like Wright's Law in particular and other dynamics of business innovation, and that beneficiaries of that adoption of EVs are Tesla and blank, blank, blank. You fill in the blanks, right? That's the general idea. And we're saying, no, that's wrong. We disagree. There's no such thing as an innate driver of electric vehicles. There is no Moore's Law of electric vehicles. What do I mean with that? Well, Moore's Law was formulated by Jordan Moore in 1965. And what's important about Moore's Law is, and Moore's Law is in general that, in transistor capacity will double every 18 months, or it will at the same cost, or it will stay the same and cost will go in half every 18 months. So it's either cost in half or capacity double. This is exponential growth. But the formulation that Jordan Moore used, there's a concept, and I forgot the name. There's a fancy name, George Stigler from Chicago. He formulated it. It's one of those things. It's a law that everybody knows about. So it's not like Newton's laws of gravity or Einstein's relativity or any of those things that somebody really discovered. It's more one of those things that everybody knew, and then it was Jordan Moore who actually formulated the thing, and he got the name, which is fine. We don't care about who got the name here. What's important here is that, there is a certain innate structure within the semiconductor industry that allows for doubling of capacity every 18 months. That's Moore's Law. It was observable by everybody. And what we're saying here is that electric vehicles are not that kind of industry. It's not observable by everybody. In fact, look at how much everybody is struggling to catch up with Tesla, right? And why is that? Well, because electric vehicles, it's really a fully integrated, vertically integrated supply chain that needs to be built at scale, at speed, and you have to iterate around all of these elements. So you have to iterate around lithium processing, lithium processing, and then lithium ion battery technology, charging technology, powertrain technology, car design, car manufacturing, AI, the operating system of the car so you can have over-the-air updates. You're integrating across the whole value chain, even the sales channels. We don't have dealers anymore. We have online selling. We have, price adjustments. We have price elasticity. We study price elasticity very differently than the car industry has been doing. So everything from the lithium mine in North Nevada all the way to the sales channel online is going to change. It's being iterated around, and the company that's doing that is Tesla. So the adoption of electric vehicles is not driven by the innate law, whatever law you want to call it. Say Art calls it the Wright's law, which is Wright's law just says with accumulated production, the learning curve goes up and you learn how to produce. That's true. Wright's law applies to Tesla, but it does not apply to the industry. That's very, very important. It does not apply to the industry. It only applies to Tesla. So what we're saying here is that the adoption of EVs will be driven by Tesla. In other words, what's being adopted here is Teslas, not EVs. Some might think it's a subtle distinction, but it's a super, super important distinction when it comes to investing, because it also means that the wealth creation, the actual value creation, that the customer value accumulation that is created by Tesla, that the part of that is going to end up with shareholders is going to end up almost exclusively with Tesla shareholders. To use Peter Thiel's analogy, P times Q, P is the market size, Q is the part of the market that you capture for your shareholders. P times Q is by far the highest. If there's only one P times Q in the electric vehicle industry, and that's the P times Q for Tesla. Everybody else has a large P too, because P is the electric vehicles industry globally, but the Q is almost zero for everybody else. There's no capturing of any value. This is our argument. And the reason we believe that's true is for the two main reasons. One is there's no innate Moore's law or anything like that is industry-wide. This is the type of industry, like, by the way, most wealth-creating industries, at least in modern times, but we can even go back to Standard Oil, we can go back to Disney, we can go back to Hewlett-Packard, any kind of wealth-creating entity in the last 200 years. And you can probably go even further back. You can use the whaling industry in Nantucket. Go on and on and on. It's always the same thing. The big wealth is not created by some innate driver that everybody takes advantage of. It is created by the ingenuity, the persistence, the risk appetite, and the sheer, sometimes luck, of the actual entrepreneurs. So with Tesla, this means that we need to apply scale and risk-taking and iteration around happy customers across the value chain. Now with Tesla in particular, it's obviously, because they're vertically integrated, there's only one customer, which is the person that buys the car, and all the other parts of the value chain, they iterate around that same customer, which is, maybe a little bit of a larger complexity here, but I think the picture is still pretty clear here. That you have a happy customer. Happy customers are always right. And you can iterate across the value chain. This is what's so important. This is why the vertical integration of Tesla, even though it's being touted a lot as important, and people talk about it, but sometimes they forget how important it is. And you can see that even supporters like ARK Invest don't quite understand the dynamics here, because on their deck, when they talk about about electric vehicles and the adoption of electric vehicles as a big idea, they're really missing the point. There is no such thing as an adoption of electric vehicles. There is no such thing as an electric vehicles industry. There is Tesla, and then there's everybody else. And the reason that's the case is because Tesla is vertically integrated. And in order to proliferate electric vehicles to global scale, you have to iterate on every part of the value chain. Again, AI, lithium mining, powertrain, charging, battery technology, car manufacturing, car design, you name it. And those are all things that Tesla is iterating around. You can, like I said, you can use the same for, Walt Disney creating an animation industry or a whole new type of entertainment industry in the 1920s and then forward. You can, Nantucket Whaling. Nantucket Whaling was successful because they iterated around the ships that were necessary to go to whaling grounds that were accessible to those ships and not to others. And by the way, it's my personal argument, and I think nobody has actually said that yet in that form, that the US Revolution and the whole Revolutionary War was enabled by the superior naval capacities of the Americans, because they had whale ships that were a lot more agile and nimble and fast, and they could beat the, by then, largest naval power in the world, which is England. They could beat them on their own ground in the waters, because they were able to navigate in the North Atlantic much faster and much more nimble than the Brits. And so the Brits had problems with bringing supply chains and so on and so forth. So again, it's paramount to distinguish an industry that has an innate driver, such as the semiconductor industry, where Moore's law was an innate thing defined by Moore's law itself. Moore said it himself. I mean, he didn't say it that way, but when he formulated Moore's law, it was something that everybody else knew. This is very important. That is not the case. That is not the case with EVs. Ask Ford, ask GM, ask Volkswagen. They don't know how to make the EVs, because they're not iterating vertically around all the parts of the supply chain that are relevant. And at this point, almost every part of the supply chain is relevant. Now, before I finish, I want to just bring one more argument that a lot of the naysayers, the Tesla naysayers, are claiming, which is they're saying, yeah, in the beginning, every industry is like that, but then over time, everything gets commoditized, and you just end up with a very competitive, low return on capital type industry. That's what they're saying, because that's what happened to the car industry. Now, of course, where this is kind of innate in our argument is, well, if every innovation and the adoption of EVs and the success of EVs right now depends on Tesla, well, then the success of Tesla depends on Tesla. In other words, Tesla can screw it up. They can, because of an unforced error, actually lose ground and become like the car industry or something like that, or the PC industry. It's up to them. And like the examples we used, which are, we used Apple, we used Amazon, we can throw in Microsoft. Microsoft created a software industry by iterating around happy customers. Now, they made some mistakes and they dropped the ball a few times, but they're coming back. And particularly now with ChatGPT, we think that they actually have a chance to really dominate the software industry again in a big way. And like what we're saying here is that you might say that the industry could get commoditized. And you might be right about that. But within that argument, there is, it's a logical conclusion from our argument that if Tesla is the driver of EV adoption, and the whole value driver of Tesla, the whole value driver of the Tesla stock, of the investment in Tesla, is driven by the customer value that Tesla can create, then it's also up to Tesla to keep iterating and delivering customer value in that industry. So if Tesla drops the ball, then yeah, the industry will become commoditized. In fact, we argue that at this stage, if Tesla drops the ball, there won't be even an EV industry. Which is another tangent I just want to go on. Let people like Electrek, for example, or other so-called electric vehicle proponents, they're in favor of competition. And we believe that at some point, competition might be a good thing. But right now, competition is almost an oxymoron. If you get competition, if Tesla falls to the level of its competitors, if it gets to the point that GMs and BMWs and so on and so forth, that their electric vehicles really are comparable to Teslas, you won't have an electric vehicle industry. Because the moment Tesla drops the ball, the IC industry will just claw back what they have, because they don't want to change. But the reason they don't want to change is because they can't. So this is all kind of a recursive argument here. Basically what we're saying is that the electric vehicle industry has only one player right now that will be able to make money, and that is Tesla, and that's because vertical integration is paramount in creating the industry. And everybody else is only doing it because they have to, because they don't want to be disrupted. They will be disrupted, though, because they can't catch up. And the only way they will catch up is if Tesla drops the ball. And if Tesla drops the ball, then they don't even have to catch up, because then they can just go back to the IC, at least for now. Maybe if there's enough critical mass at some point, once the critical mass is built to that point that everybody else also has enough sunk costs that they don't want to go back and make ICE cars, then maybe you can sort of make the argument that, well, now, okay, at this point, even though Tesla dropped the ball, everybody else would just keep making EV cars. We're way too early on that front. Maybe that's the 20 million per year mark that Musk is talking about. Once you're at that level, everybody else has to be at similar levels, at least in the aggregate. So then the critical mass will be so large that even if Tesla dropped the ball, the others will still keep making EVs. But for now, and this is the key of this particular episode and this particular critique of our idea of, the idea of EV adoption. EV adoption is not driven by any innate dynamics within the EV industry. It's simply driven by Tesla and its ingenuity and persistence and appetite for risk. And we're still way far ahead from any kind of industry-wide adoption. It is Tesla and Tesla alone. And that's good news for us shareholders, because that also means that all the value will be accrued by Tesla. Thank you.